Well, good morning. Welcome to B Cube Sunday Morning. I'm Bob Brown, and since this is first Sunday, we have got
Second Sunday.
Tom Whitmore uh, and Karen Anderson with us. They've teamed up to take over first Sunday, and
Second Sunday.
it was quite the coup. Uh, the and Tom, um, before you go, I just remind you guys that it's a great time to buy your BQ books. Our newest one is Scott's Planet. Um, the cover is a big giant rock that is reminiscent of the Oregon coast, but it's still a great book, and people are enjoying it. I got my first. I have a buddy that he reviews our books the quiet way. He goes home and reads them, and then every Thursday morning we have breakfast, and he tells me what he liked and didn't like, and I pay a lot of attention to him. So he tells me it's worth having. And that said, tell us about this black circle that we have over here.
I'll be
I'll let
happy to.
Karen introduce him.
I'll be happy to tell you about this. To orient people who are coming from all over the place, we're out in Seattle, and if you're in Seattle, you hear about salmon, and you hear a lot of stuff about salmon. It was shocking for me to learn that back when I lived on the East Coast, that most of the salmon that I was eating were farmed salmon. That wild Atlantic salmon are pretty rare. Out here in Seattle, we still have a lot of wild salmon. We have them right down the street from us at the locks, where they travel back and forth between the freshwater where they're born down to the ocean where they live, and then back up the rivers that haven't been dammed, we hope, to spawn. And there are a lot of people around here who work in the salmon industry, and Johnny Foss is one of them. And he's worked in all aspects of it as a fisherman, as an activist trying to protect the wild salmon and the salmon are under siege from a lot of things. There's global warming, there's climate change, there's industrial pollution, and then there's farmed salmon, which is a fascinating topic that we're going to spend a lot on. The reason that Tom and I have invited Johnny on is because we're focusing our podcast a lot on what life in the near future is going to be like in the United States and in the world. And certainly our experience of fish has changed a lot in our lifetimes. Um, I remember when fish was fish sticks that you got in the school cafeteria. And now we live in an age where there's salmon everywhere. And in some ways that's good. And in some ways it's bad. So we are bringing on Johnny to talk about his experience as a chef, as a fisherman, and as an activist, and give us a sense of what's going on with salmon and where we might be with them in another 20, 25 years. And Johnny does not have a picture on, but you will hear his voice and he can see us. So, Johnny, welcome to Be Cubed.
Thank you. Glad to join you folks.
And please correct my introduction and tell me what it is that you really do.
um so a whole bunch of chefs started calling me Johnny Fishmonger about 15 years ago. So before I really got on social media and everything, uh I I went with it, and so I'm all over social media as Johnny Fishmonger. So that's where most of my work and I guess notoriety is. But yeah, I've been I the day I graduated from high school, I was on a crabber out of Seattle heading up to the Bering Sea, and I fished mostly salmon, but in about 30-40 fisheries up and down the west coast from Monterey to Nome most of my life. Um, and my part-time jobs, cooking, led to becoming a chef. And as far as an activist, I'm the executive director of Wild Salmon Nation and Stop Factor Trawler Bycatch. So working, fighting corporate industrial fish farm feedlots on the west coast, mainly California, Oregon, Washington, BC, and Alaska. That's most of the work I do.
Before we talk a little bit about the West Coast wild versus farmed salmon, which is a huge issue, when we talk about salmon, what are we talking about? When I came out from the East Coast to the West Coast, I discovered that salmon looked different, it tasted different. When what is salmon in Europe, in the East Coast and the West Coast?
Wow, it's pretty rare for anybody on the whole planet to be able to taste wild Atlantic salmon anymore. I mean, they're so rare. But the true wild and free ranging Atlantic salmon that still exist pretty much from Maine north through the Canadian Maritimes, Labrador, up to Iceland, and then the Kola Peninsula in Russia, northern, a little bit northern Finland, Sweden, Norway, and that's about it as far as the wild footprint. Oh, also Ireland, the Faroes, Ireland, Scotland, and England. The only legal fisheries that exist on the planet right now left for wild Atlantic salmon are Ireland and Iceland. Um, I got to taste wild Atlantic a few times when I was in Europe, and it's fantastic. It's amazing. It's nothing like the farm stuff. The farm salmon, Atlantic salmon, almost all farm salmon is Atlantic, and it's been dumbed down. Like the difference between cattle and bison. Um, uh, it's it's a totally different as far as the wild taste versus the farm domesticated taste. On the West Coast in the Pacific Ocean, um, we've got mainly 5 species of salmon, and and the wild, and they're all wild. Um, Almost all of them go out to sea to eat before they return to spawn. And what they eat on the high seas, um, from krill and zooplankton to shrimp and herring and sardines and anchovies and squid and really has significant flavor characteristics, and the 5 species all have much different flavor characteristics and also different flavor characteristics on where they range out on the high seas and where they feed. So there's a lot of differences there, and real stark differences between kind of the plain lame mushiness of farm salmon. So similar to, people just don't want food that wants flavor. They don't want food that has any texture anymore. They just want fatty chicken breasts, tasteless pork loin, and farm salmon. Just food you can eat
Question:
with that.
what do you feed a salmon, and how do you? I don't, or do trucks bring salmon food to salmon farms? How do they get fed?
That's the huge horror story, the Achilles heel of of the the farmed carnivorous finfish industry. So, um like we don't farm lions and tigers and bears to eat, but we do farm um uh predator carnivorous finfish, and so salmon, uh I don't know if people know European sea bass, branzino, dorade. These are the really popular farm fish worldwide. Some bluefin tuna, but most of the feed is what we call stolen. Um, it comes from the worst instances, fisheries off of West Africa, where small little um, uh, village-based, outboard boat fisheries that are mostly done by hand without any mechanics, or um, uh, they swoop in with big, huge factory trawlers and take the feed and turn it into fish meal pellets. Most of the feed that's fed to farm fish is pelletized, and the fish meal also comes from the anchoveta fisheries in Peru. Another stolen dinners, and what people should be eating for their suppers. And then there's the Manhattan fishery off the East Coast, and there's also the huge Antarctic krill fishery, where the biggest factory trawlers on Earth have these huge vacuum operations, and they're down in the Antarctic, mostly illegal pirate boats, and they're just hoovering up um, the krill, which is the base of the food web in the Antarctic, and they're starving out everything from seabirds to penguins to whales to marine mammals, to make krill oil, that's a nutraceutical, and also um, it goes into all sorts of feeds: pork,
So
chicken feeds.
essentially, they're turning all of this wildlife at the bottom of the ocean into vitamin pills for farms.
And fish meal feed pellets. Um, yeah, it's a huge, it's hemispheric protein transfer. So protein from the global south is being pillaged and stolen to concentrate it down to pellets, um, to feed luxury fish for luxury people in the global north. None of this fish ever gets repatriated or redistributed to the global south, to the people that are really hungry.
Tom, you look
And
worried. Are you thinking about sushi?
No, I'm thinking about how much of what's farmed actually goes to something dear to our hearts, which is feeding cats. How much of the difficulty we're causing goes to feed pets and not even people at all.
quite a bit. There's most of the about 30% of all fish that's harvested on the oceans now goes to the aquaculture industry, to the farmed cage feedlot, um, fish farms worldwide. But a substantial amount of it goes to chicken, beef, and pork factory farms too.
Interesting. This is why so much cat food is manufactured overseas, because that's where they're getting a lot of the fish protein.
Where there's often a lot less regulation
Yeah.
and a lot less attempt to keep the fishing sustainable.
So I have to ask, when I was a kid growing up in Virginia, fish was fish sticks. When I grew up at Cape Cod, fish was actual things we pulled out of the water, mostly bass, flounder, halibut, haddock,
Lobster.
lobsters, stuff like that. Yeah, I mean clams. Um, in America, when it comes to fish and seafood, what is it that people consume? I mean, is it mostly salmon? How does America's dining on food kind of break out? What do people think of as fish?
Farm shrimp is number one. Farm salmon is number two. Um, and uh, and tuna, wild capture tuna, mostly albacore and yellowfin. Those are the two. Those are the three bigs, and
That makes sense.
most of the shrimp and tuna have huge human trafficking and slavery issues, both capture, farming, and the processing, and that's a massive controversy that isn't reported on much. But a colleague of mine, Ian Urbina, Urbina, has a project in a book called Outlaw Ocean, and he's an ex New York Times writer, and he's really brought a lot of light to the issue and covered it worldwide. But it's really significant, the amount of human trafficking and slavery that's involved in farm shrimp and the tuna, the wild capture tuna
Bob,
industries. It's
speaking
appalling.
for the southern United States, Bob would like to ask, where does farmed catfish come in?
Farm catfish, catfish um and say tilapia are mostly you know herbivores, vegetarians.
Really?
Um where it gets messed up is they don't need to be fed uh wild fish in their feed to thrive, but or to be fed bits and parts from the waste stream coming out of CAFO, concentrated animal factory operations. CAFOs are warehouse feedlot farms. So there's a lot of waste that comes from the meat raising industry that works its way into aquaculture feed, and unfortunately is fed to um, catfish and trout and tilapia, which they don't need it. But it happens. But yeah, the catfish can be raised totally on vegetative and terrestrial agriculture, um, farming grains and stuff like that, and that's the cleanest way to do it, and the most ethical.
Interesting. So catfish can be farmed fairly sustainably.
Yeah, I don't have many problems
So,
with catfish, trout farming. Um,
uh,
tilapia farming is another matter. Tilapia has just all sorts of horror stories.
interesting.
Don't eat tilapia.
Okay. This is a good tip. We will get to what is good to eat and what isn't. I have a totally weird question about salmon, and it's this. I mean, I'm real familiar with what goes on with West Coast salmon and where they need to go and where they can't go, and people are now taking dams away so that the fish can go back to spawn, and it's being very successful. Um, is it psychologically damaging to a salmon to not be able to go back and forth? I mean, here are animals that swim hundreds of miles and now they're being kept in a farm. I would think that would stress them out. Maybe I'm just losing my marbles here.
The famous June hogs of the Columbia, the genetically super salmon that hit up to 100 pounds, um, that were so famous in the Columbia River before the
Hmm.
dams. When they put in the Grand Coulee um, in the early 40s, they cut off all those salmon from 300, 400 miles of upstream spawning habitat, and those big huge Chinook salmon, also called kings, um, they went and bashed their heads against the concrete of the Grand Coulee um, for almost 7 years, and then they were extinct.
Wow.
But most salmon only live 4 years and 5 years. But those big, huge June hogs, they would stay out at sea for almost 5 years before they came back.
Wow.
So they came these massive salmon just came and butted their heads against the dam until they croaked,
Wow.
and went extinct. So they, salmon are incredibly resilient and persistent. When the Klamath dams came down since last year, on the famous, we had the Elwha in Washington State. The two dams come down on the Elwha. There was water where no salmon had been for over 100 years, and there were female coho salmon that were laden with eggs, ready to spawn, that were up above the dams within 2 weeks. On the Klamath, those dams mostly came down over last year in the winter, um, and I was with the Yurok tribe that's members that are at the mouth of the Klamath River just a little over a month ago, and nobody thought the salmon were going to make it more than maybe 30, 40 miles up the river. But by late October, they'd already made it up to the two barrier fish ladders, and nobody thought they were going to make it up over there. There's these old creaky fish ladders that Army Corps of Engineer put up, and the Sisk and the what was the other one? Reno. I maybe got the name wrong. They made it up over that. Everybody was like, "Oh my God!" Then they crossed the California border into Oregon and approached Klamath Lake, and everybody's like, "The lake's too shallow. It's too warm. They're gonna die. They're not gonna make it across." 2 days later, they had made it across the lake and entered their headwaters, Williamson and Sprague rivers, where they hadn't been for 125 years.
Wow.
So they got a sniff of a molecule of their home water out at sea, and they got in the river and they just charged. And hundreds have made that. I think it's about 350 mile journey up into the headwaters, where they haven't been for 125 years. And in the tribal community, in Klamath, near the mouth of the river, on the Pacific, folks were just, everybody was just in awe. Like, it happened so fast. They're so amazing. Like, nobody thought the salmon were just gonna repatriate their rivers that quickly and that fast. Even like, you know uh, those of us that are just, absolutely enthralled by salmon, like myself, and in a million different ways, it just blows your mind. Uh, that the resiliency of salmon and their strength and their desire to just get the heck upstream to where they're from, um, is unbelievable. And that's a story that's going to be coming out a lot more. It's been getting a lot of press, but it's going to get a heck of a lot
So
more over the next year or
a lot
so.
of success stories are coming out of Washington and Oregon. Um, we have one of the people in our audience. I can see a chat stream coming on the side of my screen. You may be able to see it as well if you click on chat, which is somewhere confusing, probably down at the.
Also, Bob has put it up for everyone to see.
Yes, yeah. Liam Westcott has brought up several comments about how incredibly enormous the seafood industry is in Alaska. And Alaska has, in some ways, a similar dynamic in that they have the tribes, they have wild salmon, they have fisheries, but their economy is very different. Washington's economy is not salmon dependent, but Alaska's is extremely tied. Their economy is very much tied up to Alaska. Could you talk a little bit about what's going on up there in terms of salmon habitat and farming versus freshwater?
Yeah. So I've spent most of my life in the salmon industry in Alaska. So mostly fishing, but also processing. Um, and most of my fishing was out in the Aleutian Islands and the Bering Sea. Up there, the Bering Sea, especially Bristol Bay, the famous sockeye salmon run. That's the cleanest, most pristine, and existing salmon and largest existing salmon engine left on Earth. There's no dams, there's no oil rigs, there's no mining, there's no logging. We're fighting the mining like crazy, but um, there's very little. There's no roads. There isn't huge population centers, and um, uh, like 60 to 70 million sockeye salmon return to the Bristol Bay drainages every year. So it's just massive. I mean, the runs were ever on say the Sacramento, um, the Klamath, or the Columbia rivers, maybe 10 million plus each. So the Bristol Bay region's 5 rivers, and you know 60 million salmon come back every year, and we're allowed, after the escapement, the amount of fish that are needed to get up the rivers to spawn and ensure that there'll be subsequent generations. But we're allowed to catch in the 30 millions. So 30 millions times say 5 pounds. Um, that's a lot of protein. Um, South of um, the Bering Sea, in the Gulf of Alaska, North Pacific, salmon runs aren't as prolific and aren't doing as great. There are certain places where they consistently are doing pretty darn good. Copper River, super famous. Um, Somehow the Copper River salmon, wherever they go out on the high seas, and I see uh, Liam Westcott talking about the factory trawlers. Somehow the factory trawlers aren't whacking them out, haven't found out where they go on the high seas, and where they feed. Um, the factory trawlers have found most of the other salmon um, out on the high seas, and where they interact with the pollock, the the McDonald's fish sandwiches, and Gorton's fish fingers and fish sticks, and all that, where those all come from that huge, massive factory trawler fishery. So most of the salmon fisheries south of the Gulf of Alaska, um, and the North Pacific, are in fair shape to terrible shape. There isn't a lot of fisheries that are in great shape, but we did have um, some pretty amazing returns and survival on pink salmon and sockeye runs all the way down to the Columbia River this season, which kind of blew everybody's minds. Just when you think that ocean acidification and global warming and sea temperature rise and everything, the seas are going to boil and it's going to be the end of everything, and Mother Nature pops off, and you have this, and salmon have had great ocean survival, and they come back gangbusters. Other rivers failed, but that seems to be a real cyclical thing. I've been in the fisheries for over 40 years, and every time I think it's all over, they come back. It's amazing, but I, I'm scared shitless, about global warming and all those effects.
You led me right into the next thing. I wanted to have you talk a little bit about global warming and acidification and pollution in terms of oysters and shellfish, particularly out here because Oregon and Washington, big shellfish industries.
And we've certainly been seeing a lot of bacterial contamination on beaches being closed for shellfishing
And
because
there's
of,
also invasive green mussels.
yeah.
What's gonna are we in 25 years? Are we still gonna have oysters and native shrimp?
Boy, if I could answer that one, um, like, mind my fish talk, but I'm definitely I'm pretty scared shitless is the truth. I'm worried. I'm worried. So w- ocean acidification is tied to global warming. So the carrying capacity of the ocean to absorb CO2 is rising and rising and rising. And the one huge scare that we've had is that uh certain plankton and oysters that that need almost perfect acidity and beneficial acidity to form their initial cell structure out of calcium that they grab from ocean water has been impacted. Um, Oysters were having a real hard time on the west coast forming their initial shells. So it there was some huge concerns that we weren't going to have any more oysters. But scientists that grow oysters in the hatcheries figured out how to time the oysters around seasonal upwelling events that bring a lot of really acidic water to the surface that were impacting the formation of oysters. So, you know what? Other species that have hard shells like shrimp, um, and all the way down the food chain to the tiniest creatures, they're all impacted by the ocean acidification, and so their protective shell formation, or shells of the homes for bivalves, oysters, clams, and mussels, um, that's really problematic, and
Yeah, and just
and
quickly for those who haven't followed the actual science on it, one of the major causes of ocean acidification is the dissolving of CO2 into water. You dissolve the CO2 into water, you get basically carbonated water, which is much more acid than the water you usually drink.
yeah, and about 30%. I was reading earlier this morning. I think about 30% of all the CO2 on the planet is sequestered in seawater, and and seawater is a huge, global sink and moderator for all things and all climate, all the different climate, uh lots of words here, but just all the different uh
The climate change factors that have been leading to more, more tornadoes, hurricanes, all of that. The
yeah, roger
yeah,
roger that,
yeah.
So
exactly.
I had a question about a particular type of shrimp. Um, I go to enormous lengths to avoid farmed shrimp because their texture is so creepy. And I tend to wait to eat shrimp until we get Alaska spot prawn. Is that what's going on with them? Are they fairly safe? Why are they still one of the shrimp that you can rely on to taste really good?
Well, I won't knock um shrimp from warmer waters too much, but and uh and definitely to eat shrimp fresh and seasonal in the coastal waters of, say, Charleston, Savannah, New Orleans is definitely an incredible treat. But they're way different. Cold water shrimp, northern shrimp, your solid shrimp, the pink shrimp, little pink shrimp, and spot prawns. They live in cold water regimes, and um, they they have higher fat content,
Ah,
higher oil content, um, and also, they don't live in a similar like mud environments. Like almost all warm water shrimp, you have to devein them
Right.
and clean out the poop. Um, Northern shrimp, you don't have to.
Hmm.
Um,
You have just
uh,
explained why I like spot prawn so much. Yeah, Tom and I were at a very high-end sushi restaurant the other night, and he served spot prawn, which he said are difficult to get, and they were exceptionally good. So yeah, I was impressed.
yeah, you know, there's just certain fish and seafoods that we shouldn't expect it to eat them every night. Um, it's and you gotta eat them seasonally and special occasions and um spot prawns are are in pretty good shape from Northern California up to the Bering Sea, and the fisheries are pretty well managed. There aren't a lot of places that are totally fished out of
When
spot
you talk
prawns,
about a
and
fishery being managed, and we're talking about wild seafood, are they being managed through international accords, through local offshore agreements, state level, federal level? What is fisheries management?
so spot prawns are managed by state or by a province, like say Alaska or BC or Washington, Oregon, California. Salmon and say halibut, black cod are are fish that travel. So they travel through a lot of jurisdictions. So there are compacts between countries and states um, to manage, and the management is both overseen by states once they enter the coastal waters, the 3 mile limit, and inshore. Um, and the states don't have as much jurisdiction outside the 3 mile limit in the exclusive economic zone, the EEZ. Um, and that's where you have NOAA, NIMS at the federal level, and the International Pacific Halibut Commission, which is um, a joint compact between uh, British Columbia and Washington and Alaska. So they're managed jointly. So yeah, and pelagic fish, everything from fish that travel offshore, inshore, albacore tuna, um, excuse me, um, anchovies, sardines. Those are usually um, managed by multi-state and multinational um, uh, agencies or agreements, treaties.
I'm going to take us in a very, very different direction and try to lure you into a discussion of science fiction. Um, Currently, there are researchers in Japan who are working on creating essentially the Global Seafood Alliance had an article about a water formula called the third water that is a water environment that is they're hoping to send up to the space station to try to raise things like shrimp. Um, do you see this as a potential future? Do you think it's realistic?
Carnivorous species are extremely problematic. The amount of energy um, that's needed. So uh, one of the biggest problems with raising carnivorous finfish, say salmon, is uh, it takes 5 to 6 pounds of inputs of everything, you know, that they're feeding them, and if it's marine derived matter or soy from the Amazon rainforest or corn or wheat or whatever they're feeding them, it, you know, um it just the math doesn't work out very well. um they'd have to carry, you know, several times the weight of those shrimp to space to feed them, or they're going to have to create algae in space. And there's just much simpler herbivorous proteins, if they're
We
gonna, you
need
know.
catfish in space.
Yeah, you know, and there's all these efforts that have been totally discounted, to grow animal proteins in tanks, in lab tanks. So what we call, you know, lab fish, lab proteins, pork, chicken, beef, and fish. And um they're so expensive and so difficult. The feed components, the raw stock feeds that have to be fed to these lab organisms, and the enzymes and everything are so expensive. Like there's a couple companies that are making lab raised coho salmon right now. Coho salmon fillet. It's not really a whole animal, a
Wow.
whole fish, but
Mhm.
just a like a cube. And it's served in a few restaurants in San Francisco and Portland, Seattle. This company called Wild Type. It's a crypto con scam. It's costing them $40,000 to $300,000 like a pound to raise. And the dream of even plant-based foods, like all the plant-based burgers and all that stuff is not proven out. It's, you know, a lot of crypto con style hype, you know, that this is going to be the new food for the planet and everything, that, and it ends up just being a super luxury food for the ultra rich.
Soylent Green is
And
expensive as well as awful.
um I I've only tried a little bit of, I really didn't like the the lab tank meat or anything like that. I haven't tried the fish. I don't think I ever will. I think that's just, you know, too abhorrent. But as far as space, you know, solid proteins, chewable, mouthfeel, pleasant proteins, um those that there's some huge problems there, you know. I think at first space-based foods are going to be, you know, slimy stuff coming out of a squeeze tube. And that's what space travelers are going to have to eat at first. um I think you're probably, you know, generations away from having solid foods in space. But hey, don't count out AI. AI might figure it all out. But you know.
So I have
The
to
expense of getting it back is also much higher than the return.
ask here, um, as consumers, people love fish. Obviously, there's a huge market for it. How can you be a responsible consumer of fish in this day and age?
Eat lower on the food chain. That's the number one, um you know, eco lesson. Um you know, bivalves that don't require to be fed, but definitely they feed themselves. So oysters, clams, and mussels, seaweed, you know, incredible tasting seafoods that are pretty pretty benign. Um, eating eating smaller fish, the little silver fishes. It's very, very interesting in North America, U.S. and Canada. We're the only countries on the planet that don't eat our little silver fishes that are in the multitudes all around our oceans.
I
Um,
lived in Italy and you never saw slabs of fish. You saw little tiny fish getting fried up and stuff like that,
Frito
or
misto.
or pickled in oil. Yeah, you got little jars of the the little smoked or preserved anchovies, I guess.
We hear a lot less about sardines than we did when I was growing up. People eat
Yeah,
them a lot less.
the whole world eats sardines and anchovies and similar species um in a much larger volume than the larger fish, you know, salmon and tuna and all that. um you know, and I think like seafood should be a special occasion food. I think the same
Wow.
with meat. Instead of eating um you know protein, you know, animal proteins every meal every day, you know, let's replace those with a lot more grains and vegetables and simpler foods that are much more healthy for
Wow.
us and healthy for the planet. Big complex proteins should be more of a special occasion food. How often do most people eat a New York or a filet mignon steak, you know?
Mhm.
How often you know, do people eat you know, toro, you know, bluefin belly, you know? How often do we get to eat you know, Copper River salmon? I you know, instead of just farming the hell out of the planet and sucking up all the resources to make crappy proteins like chicken breasts and pork loin and farm salmon. You know, oh, somebody said beans are your friend. Heck yeah, I'd never. I really feel terrible about
I want to bring up
excluding the
something.
legumes.
I want to bring up
Go.
something that's gotten to be an almost forgotten thing, which is we have too many people. You know, if we had fewer people, we could afford to eat these things more often.
You remember in the 70s, the big ZPG movement,
Yeah,
zero population growth, 60s
people
and
are now
70s.
afraid of that.
China's
Yeah.
going in the opposite direction. Billionaires having hundreds of children by surrogacy so they can take over the world by marrying their kids off to other billionaires' kids. This
That's
is not a
scary.
joke. This was
And,
in the Wall Street Journal. This is really scary.
and almost all the billionaires have significant uh mental uh um deficiencies or say um
I thought it was
Well, they
moral
have moral
deficiencies.
deficiencies, but I don't
Yes.
think they necessarily have mental deficiencies.
Well,
um that's scary.
yes,
But
it is. I want to, as we are approaching the end of this amazing discussion, which I am really thrilled about, and I've learned a huge amount, talk to us a little bit about, give us a good recipe for working with fish that are lower on the fish food chain. Instead of rushing off to the supermarket and buying a big slab of salmon, what should we be getting instead, and how should we be cooking it?
okay, just real quick, I just wanted to address population and food production. So one of the big reasons that industrial corporate aquaculture is getting pushed around the planet is like 10 years ago it was we got to feed the 6 billion, and then it's just ratcheted up their whole reasoning, you know,
Hmm.
the 7 billion, 8 billion, 10 billion in 2050. And we got to farm the oceans to feed everybody. But right now, of all the food that's produced on the planet, so mostly on land, um you know, 30-40% goes to waste because um we don't have ways to preserve it, refrigerate it, distribute it. Um, in the rich northern countries, 30-40% of all the food that goes into our houses or into restaurants ends up in the bin, ends up getting thrown in the garbage. We have
Wow.
such incredible
Hmm.
food waste and incredible distribution problems. We could make all the food in the world in the global north, but it's not going to get shared with the global south. So and where's the huge population increases happening? Um, Not in the global north where we have populations shrinking everywhere. Europe, Japan. Um, it's, the population increases are in the global south, and we're not willing to share food with them. So we could produce all the farm fish on the planet in the northern hemisphere, but it's never going to get to the people that go hungry. The 3 billion people that go hungry every night, that rely on marine based proteins for their most, for a substantial amount of their proteins, everything. So recipes. So what can we do that would be simple? You know, um the easiest way to cook bivalves is steam them. Um, you know, Steam mussels, clams, oysters, um, and then they take on a form that's more palatable for most folks than raw, um, and definitely enjoyable. And um, any sauce that you would put on chicken, you can put on your bivalves, mussels, clams, and oysters. Very simple. I mean, anything teriyaki to ketchup, um, to your most sophisticated, miso glazes or curries or,
Mhm.
all that stuff. Coconut milk. Those are really really simple. And then the next probably easiest recipes for folks is um, uh, canned and tinned and jarred little silver fishes. And my favorite thing that I try to eat almost every day is something out of a can: tuna, anchovies, sardines on a salad. I love um Caesar salad. um the construct of a Caesar salad with with canned fish on it. That's like my favorite thing for lunch almost every day if I could eat it, possibly if everything works out perfectly. Um, and you know, Crackers and um wild salmon out of a can. Uh, your non-white chunk tuna. Um, you
Mm.
know, your chunk tuna, the bigger, the firmer, whiter, chunkier tuna is the older tuna that picks up more um, mercury. It's a lot safer to eat tuna that isn't white chunk tuna. To
Know
eat
that.
your pardon?
I didn't know that. That's
Yeah,
fascinating.
yeah. Your younger tunas, your albacores, um, are much safer, and they don't pick up as much mercury. The longer fish live in the temperate regions of the oceans, the more mercury they absorb. So yeah, simple foods. Whatever you can put on a cracker, whatever you can put on a salad, whatever you can steam.
Pickled
Those are
herring.
the very simple seafoods that are most beneficial for humans, your health, um, all the omega 3 fatty acids, the long chain fatty acids that are so good for you, and good for the planet. It works. It's a double bonus.
Johnny, when I first moved out here, there was a smelt run, and I went down to the supermarket where they had smelt, and I was ordering my smelt, and the woman behind me looked at me oddly and said, "Smelt? Are you feeding those to your cats?" And I was like, "What?" Because it's what I grew up eating in Massachusetts was these little tiny smelts.
There's
Um,
also a local restaurant that makes what they call fries with
fri-
eyes, which
I
are
love fries with
little
eyes.
fried smelt.
Yeah, fried anchovies, sardines, and somebody mentioned mackerel. Mackerel is another fish that we should be eating a ton more of. And on the East Coast, more bluefin, bluefish, man. I love that stuff. But yeah, um, you know, um, the smelt, the reason why I have such a bad signal right now is I'm down on the Columbia River, between Portland and the coast, and there aren't a lot of cell towers down here. But I'm talking to fishermen and organizing what's going to be a big promotion for the river smelt, the Ulicon,
Mhm.
which come in usually February, March,
Yes, that's where I eat.
Yeah.
That's
into the
exciting.
Columbia and um and the Cowlitz, the Willamette and the Sandy, um and we're organizing to it's something that used to be really huge, say 20 years ago to 50 years ago, in um all the major population centers and just people. It was a big thing up and down the coast, and it's kind of fallen off. But the fisheries come back in very healthy. There's been big smelt runs on the Columbia the last several years, and we're expecting another one pretty big this year.
Mhm.
So we're
Do
trying
they
to
have
get.
like a festival when the smelt come in? Is there like
They
a
used to. They used to. Almost all the smelt festival. La Conner's the only one that still has a smelt festival, up north of Seattle.
Oh
But
yes, I'm writing this down.
There
yeah,
are also
we're
grunion festivals down in.
Grunion Fest. Yeah, they ask you not to eat so much grunions from Southern California. But yeah, one of my favorite
Mhm.
National Geographic films that used to play when we were kids was the people on the beaches in LA going
Yeah.
out at night and picking up the grunion off the beach when they came in to spawn. But
Mhm.
yeah, I'm working to get 50 chefs in Seattle and 50 chefs in Portland, um to put the Yukon, the Hooligan, the river smelt on the menu
Yeah.
in February and March when they show up. So we're hoping to give the fishermen a big shout out and a big boost, and get everybody enjoying them. So
I'll be looking
um,
for that.
We have a friend who ran one of the first sustainable sushi restaurants in West Seattle, and
He knows Hajime.
yeah, Hajime
Hajime and
Sato.
we've been talking a lot lately. He's back in the
He's
area,
back.
so
Yes.
Yeah,
He's in
we're
and
Portland,
working
I
on
think.
a whole bunch of projects right now. Um,
he was asked whether, yeah, how he could tell that the fish he was getting was sustainable, and he said, he said basically the people producing it often lie, but they only lie to him once.
yep. Hajime and I are fellow travelers, and I have immense respect for
He's an
Hajime and his knowledge.
amazingly respectable man.
If you live in Seattle, he started Mashiko Restaurant, which he has since sold to his employees. And he was back east, and now where he won a James Beard Award, and he's now back out on the West Coast. So
Yeah,
we're getting ready to wind up here. Bob
because
is
Bob showed
leaning
up.
over us. Johnny, thank you so much. This was a great session, and I am so grateful for you coming on with us.
Thank you. What a pleasure. And we didn't get to talk too much about science fiction and the future, but
Oh,
This
we
hope
talked
to
about
talk
the
to.
future the whole time.
this was
Yeah.
about the future.
Okay. Um, thank you. It's really something to chat with you folks.
We enjoyed it. Bob, you want to?
You want to take
Oh,
us
I
out,
was
Bob?
just curious. Growing up in the South, where our fish was 50% mackerel patties that we mixed up with eggs and cornmeal out of a can, um, and catfish. So this was an interesting perspective on all of that, and I'm always liked fish. So you guys have taught me a lot. Now, what I will remind us all is that we have 6 days left of the open call for Alternative Liberties 2. We have received 300 submissions, rejected 122 of them, have the rest of them are in a box fighting for space. And I've seen some of the stronger submissions are vicious. They have ripped entire paragraphs out of other submissions and are using them as clubs on some of the weaker ones.
I'll be working on those today.
It's just amazing. Yeah. So that, and we are coming up. Jim Wright and I think Jim Wright, but David Gerald and I will be at RadCon on along with Tom and Karen on February 12th, 13th.
And Deborah will be there too. Deborah Godfrey.
Yes. A lot of the BQ family will be there. And we're trying to figure out how to make sure we all have fun. It's a fun little convention. I will tell you, if you want to do a convention where they don't hide their guests of honor in hotel rooms, where they shuttle them around back and forth secretly. No, they throw them out into the masses, and you'll find David Gerald sitting out in the dealer's room or sitting in the restaurant, holding court. It's a fun element to go. And since it's down here on the Columbia, if your boat pulls in, we'll see you. I'll buy you dinner, Johnny.
Yeah, it's going to be in Pasco, February 13 through 15.
Yeah, and it's fun.
Awesome.
And that said, I am going to let you all go, and thank you for showing up, guys. Not
Thank you,
only
guys.
our guests, but Liam and all of our commenters, Andrew. I know there's a lot more, but those are the ones that I saw your name popping up right there.